news, information, opinions, and trivia. From the cowboy that knows, please welcome Cowboy Ron.
Hey, glad to be back with you. Tonight I want to share some more when I was a tour guide. Our playlist on YouTube on that is Cowboy Ron Remembers. And for those people just joining us, I was a Washington, D.C. tour guide for 45 years before I moved to Arizona. And I lived in Washington, D.C. and we had a canal called the C&O Canal, standing for Chesapeake in Ohio. The figures on it was 182.4 miles from Georgetown to Cumberland, Maryland. The average depth in Georgetown is 7 feet. Now behind me is a canal boat, one of the old boats, and on Sundays, the National Park Service, you can go out there and ride that, and they pull it along the towpath with mules, and it's a lot of fun. But the thing about the C&O Canal, it actually one time went all the way over behind the Capitol, over behind close to South Capitol Street, and there's still a sign there saying Canal Street. But George Washington was one of the original founders of that canal. And it was called the Potomac Company in those days. And the reason he got involved is he didn't want to see commerce going from Pittsburgh down the Ohio to the Mississippi and maybe down the Gulf, and the country would have two different commerce. So he invested quite a bit of money in it. In fact, when he died, he left his stock to George Washington University to start a university, which became George Washington University, one of the oldest universities in the nation's capital. Excuse me. But it's a lot of fun. Now, the water only goes 35 miles from D.C. One more thing about the canal. It came right down Constitution Avenue, right behind the White House. Now, today, the canal is no longer in the city. The inner city. It's in Georgetown, which is the older part of Washington, D.C. But originally, it was a creek there, and called Tiber Creek. And that area was a swamp area, and it wasn't considered to be a great job working at the White House helping the president, because people would bring their dead cows and sheep down there and just throw them in the creek. And if you worked in the White House, you had to put a lot of talcum powder on to kind of protect you against the odors. But along the canal, I've walked from Washington, D.C. when I was in my 20s up to Point of Rocks, Maryland, about 75 miles. They have picnic areas along there and some camping areas, usually patrolled by park rangers. And then later on in life, we went up to Cumberland, Maryland. Me and three of my buddies got some canoes, and we came down through the mountains as far south as Paw Paw. Supreme Court justices have walked that canal. One of them, forget his name. But when you go to Washington, D.C., it's a great thing to see. Also, the canal crossed over at Georgetown into Rosalind, Virginia. And that was called an aqueduct. And my understanding, it was filled in, and that was one of the bridges. Now, that aqueduct is no longer there, but if you'll get on Key Bridge, walk across and just look down, you'll see the pylons that supported that canal. Key Bridge gets its name because as you enter Georgetown, to the right is the summer home of Francis Scott Key. Well, I enjoyed showing that to people, and it was nice to walk along. You can rent bikes, and it's a very safe environment. You can go on up a little farther, about 10 or 15 miles, to Great Falls. It's not as big as Niagara Falls, but it's still very impressive. I guess one more thing I would tell you about the Potomac River that runs along the side of the canal it's tidewater all the way up to the Georgetown area, and that becomes fresh water. Okay, this is Cowboy Ron saying so long, and we'll see you later on.